What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. We're going through some 2024 NFL draft, last rumors, news, updates, etc. And we officially have under 4 hours to go before the draft kicks off. So I'm as enthusiastic hourly as I'm going to be, but I'm very, very hyped. Finally, all of the, hundreds and hundreds of mock drafts that I've seen people go through. There's plenty of y'all that have jumped on here and mentioned that you've gone through at least 100 of yourselves. Every scenario, every which way you can try to creatively come up with some kind of plan, trade ups, trade downs, best value picks, right? I think I've seen one recently yesterday. Somebody believes Jordan Travis will fall down to the sixth, and it went ahead and scooped him up. But we have some interesting stuff. One of the rumors I wanted to kick things off with today was we found out yesterday T. Higgins, along with Trey Hendrickson, believe they both got franchise tagged, or at least are on the final year of their deal, and they've requested a trade. We've seen Joe Douglas pull out some rabbits from the hat. So I would be interested to see if he tries to apply that to maybe his draft strategy, right? Instead of trading up, maybe you hope to see if Aroma Dunze can really fall to you at 10. If he doesn't, or if you decide you don't want to go that route with your pick, would you consider trading some future resources for a T. Higgins to bring him on? Now, I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I do think the biggest caveat there would be that you want a long-term running mate, right? This is essentially the Quinnen Williams conversation for Garrett Wilson. You have a star, potential elite player, top 10 guy at his position. You want to make sure that you can pair him with a running mate for the long term, right? At least the next 2-3 years. I don't want to get into the situation like we're seeing in the defensive tackle room where we're continuing to get one 1 year veteran rental type of guys to surround him with. And we're not really keeping the bottom of the cupboard stocked or really investing a premium resource into some of the top guys. So with that said, in other news, right, we are having a lot of rumors pop up pretty consistently that teams are aiming to trade up, right? We've gotten, quite a number of teams from the Colts. You're hearing Oakland maybe looking to move up. We talked about the Bengals. You're hearing a lot of momentum about the Eagles wanting to shoot up into the top 10, where they're not going to need a quarterback. So you're expecting them to target a tackle or a wide receiver. And I would imagine they're probably looking to invest in that offensive line. They may have, dialed in on a specific target that they love. I am curious to see, with all of this stuff going on, which way Joe Douglas will land, right? Trade down, I think, is still the best option for the New York Jets overall. It's hard to miss, right? It's one of the most interesting tackle classes for me that I've seen in a while. I mentioned this in one of the videos I dropped earlier this week. You may see 8 tackles go, right? We haven't seen this really in over 10 years. I think a couple years back, maybe we've seen, 5 tackles. That may be about the average for what you would consider a really, really good draft. But this could be one of those elite tier options, right? And you have to keep in mind that you have an interesting mix of players that are probably going to go in round 1. Guys like Amarius Mims, guys like Tyler Guyton, where they don't have a ample amount of experience, right? You're generally talking about a decent amount of 1-year starters, but in that 1 year, you've seen a lot of upside with these guys, right? You've seen strong footwork out of them. You've seen elite athletic traits and or measurables that make you feel really, really comfortable about dropping back and maybe taking a guy like Amarius Mims or a Tyler Guyton, especially considering our situation. How much, I heard Ian from Jet Central mention this. Joe Douglas has stated on a number of different occasions that post-signing Morgan Moses, John Simpson, Tyron Smith, he's finally completed the offensive line rendition, right? Does that mean that he's comfortable enough in the current state of his starting five and or just the unit overall to bypass adding a significant resource, right? There's guys that I love in the third. There's guys that I love in the fourth, not just at tackle, but at the guard positions as well. And maybe I shouldn't say love, that's a strong word, but there's guys that have traits, they have a skill set that I think would really mesh well, and they'll have the time to sit there and develop to where maybe you don't need that, but it's not a guarantee, right? I think the smart move is to 100% go with the highest floor player you can get. We've seen for 2 years now, and I don't remember all of the stats to the T, but last year, 11 different tackles played almost 10% of the snaps for us, right? Absolutely ridiculous. The year before that, I think we had almost 16, 17 rotations. Last year, we had 13 or 14 different offensive line combinations. So not only are you not consistently getting guys together that can gel, you're having to move AVT consistently. Joe Tippmann's had to switch from guard to center. You've had Mekhi Becton that you've had to switch from left to the right side. It's not cohesive for anybody. The player is going to suffer from a developmental aspect because not only is it completely disorienting to have to go from one side to the other and think about the protections and inverse them in your mind, and now you're having to deal with maybe not utilizing your strong hand as your initial punch if you're not delivering a two-hand strike. The footwork's going to be completely different. You're working combination or stunt blocks with guys that you haven't worked with in that capacity because you've been on the other side of the line. So there is a lot of nuance in the offensive line position. And for me, let's say we make the playoffs. I think that 100% has to be the lowest expectation for us this year. We make the playoffs, but we can't go deep because we don't necessarily have the deepest wide receiver room. I could potentially live with that, right? I can take a look and say, okay, we have the offensive line in place. We love the running back room. They're doing damage. Garrett Wilson obviously is still putting in his work, 1,000+ yards, maybe double-digit touchdowns, but we had to settle for Allen Lazard still being our third or fourth. Mike Williams maybe didn't get a chance to play the entire year for some critical games. I could understand that, right? You had some younger guys that maybe weren't ready to step up. If you want to talk about bringing in mid-tier guys like a Brennan Rice, a Luke McCaffrey, a Bub Means, any of those lower tier options when you talk about like the end of day 2, day 3, right? I could understand that. And then I would also expect the natural progression there will parlay itself into, helping things return to the mean for us. But if we go back into another season being tossed into the toilet because we couldn't salvage our offensive line, there's, for one, the entire franchise is resetting. It's a wrap, guys. Robert Saleh's gone. Keith Carter, Nathaniel Hackett. I know, all of those names aren't necessarily ones that guys are going to shed tears for, but all of those guys are gone. And even though I think Joe Douglas has a chance to make it, theoretically, he's going to leave too, because now you've had 3 years of surrounding and, providing an offensive line that couldn't do anything positive realistically, right? Regardless of what the expectations were, you're expecting them to, you're expecting much better things, right? You have to learn these lessons. You have to be able to apply the corrections and resolution early. Dano, my guy, what's good? Stopping by to show some love. Enjoy the night. Yeah, I'll still be working for the early part. I'm going to try to stop by my boy Gunny's draft party, at least for the first 30 minutes or so. Depends on how much work I got to wrap up. And then I'll be trying to listen to the draft and what's popping off on my way home. But between wrapping up work and travel, I'm going to miss like the first hour and some change of the draft. So that's tough. But I always end up going back and trying to catch all the highlights, catch the different networks that are, announcing things too. There's usually a few gyms that are there. Remind people to enjoy the pick and not the jet. Yeah. That's a huge thing for us. As long as it's not defense. If it's defense, I have nothing positive to say for anybody, right? I think the coaching staff obviously will do a great job with whoever it is, a Quinyon Mitchell or Byron Murphy or whoever the crazy pick would be. But I would have nothing positive to really say about that. It would be a huge knock against that entire organization if they go defense. Huawei, appreciate you coming through, my guy. Dano, appreciate the love. Yeah, I'm just interested to see how things play out, right? We've seen this smoke and mirrors. We've seen this story happen quite a bit, right? The day of the draft, suddenly every team's in love with the same handful of guys. Who's going to fight? The more intriguing one that I've seen recently, though, is that teams may not be willing to give up the entire farm for the 4th overall pick, and that's where things are probably going to kick off, right? I think in some order, you are going to see 3 quarterbacks come off in the top 3, right? The Bears are locked into Caleb Williams. It sounds like Jaden is actually going to be going to the Commanders, even though there was some rumors about him, maybe pulling a Eli Manning with them, or at least not really feeling like he'll do his best at that organization. And then the Patriots. A lot of the conversation around them is, do you want to build the infrastructure or do you want the quarterback? And I think, honestly, you need to go quarterback. This is one of those situations where you're not really playing a 50-50 game with the guy that you're going to select, right? It's going to be Jaden Daniels or it's going to be Drake May. And I think instantly if those guys come in, you're not putting them in the bottom third. You're maybe putting them as mid-tier to like the early 20s in terms of rankings, the way that we've seen quarterback play pop off. So if you think you have the guy that can overcome certain circumstances, I think they need to roll the dice there. So 4 is where things kick off. Our team's going to trade up, and then who's it going to be? Marvin Harrison? Is it going to be the Malik Neighbors? I don't think Joe Alt is really in that conversation until you get to the Chargers pick. So if it's defense, then I think maybe we flip Reed for a 2, but that's a long shot. I've seen this scenario pop up. Somebody floated the idea, and I think it was like a Bleacher Report article, of course, but somebody floated the idea that maybe we take Quinyon Mitchell there, right? Yeah, not doing that meeting. That maybe we draft Quinyon Mitchell and then we do flip DJ Reed to get into the 2nd round, and I think the target there was supposed to be Ricky Pearsall. I don't love it. It's not the worst thing. It's not the worst, I would say, trade idea I've seen presented, at least when it comes to the defensive players. But we just really don't need it. If you were going to do that, I would say stay at 10, get whoever it is we're targeting, still flip DJ Reed for day 2. And then I love my guy out of Rutgers that's going to be a round 2 selection, most likely Max Melton. When you want to talk about Kingslayers or a guy that's really been able to compete and do his best against some of the elite guys, Max Melton was one of the only few guys to be able to lock up Marvin Harrison Jr. in man coverage. I love his traits in zone. He balled out during the combine with what he showed. So if you wanted to try to swap out DJ Reed for a younger guy, more valuable contract, you're going to have him locked in for 4 years. That would be the route I go instead of taking a Quinyon early. Save us money though, but that's not our goal. Yeah. Ultimately, it's also going to be hard to replace, that camaraderie, that synergy that the defense really has. I don't think I really want to do much tampering with anything that can, throw out what they already had done. Adding a pass rusher is very different from swapping out, a pivotal player on the boundary, especially the way that we like to play our defense. Draft day, Tigo, big facts. Tigo, are you joining Gunny's draft party? Or I know you're usually looped in with Green Bean and Matt and all of them, but I'm sure we'll run into each other at somebody's event. Can I wear my onesie all day? We do need some Jets onesies, some Jets draft day onesies, huh? I should have took today off. I say every year I'm going to take at least the first 2 days of the draft off, and I never end up planning it right. But I got a new baby on the way. I'm trying to save up the time. If May gets past New England at 4, this is where the Giants and Minnesota go all out. I think realistically, Minnesota. Okay, so if the reports are true that you don't have to give up the farm to get to number 4, obviously each team is going to play that a little bit differently. But let's say it's not going to cost multiple first round picks for a team to get to 4 for a wide receiver, or if they want to jump somebody for a quarterback, then I think the Vikings maybe take their cue from whatever trade gets initiated if they're not the first one to do it. And they may sit at 11, right? I know they traded up to get number 23, and that, the expectation was they would package those to make sure they can get into the top 5 to get who they want. But I wouldn't be surprised. I think the JJ McCarthy hype is just that. I think we've overdone it. I shouldn't say we don't care too much unless they can push guys down. But I think it's overdone. I really, really like the kid. Think there's something to be said about, people tripping about the volume of throws that he had and not making a ton of big time throws and all that kind of stuff. You can only do what the offense wants you to do. And I don't think that Harbaugh was hiding him by any means with the defense and the strong running game. I think they kind of took a page out of what we've seen for the Patriots for all of those years. Tom Brady wasn't dropping back and throwing 35 plus times all the time. He was able to go out there and use, Jordan White and use Woodhead and all of these different guys to allow him to play his elite game manager role. And then when he had to put on his cape, he would do just that. I think JJ McCarthy may be in the same mold there. Obviously, two different kind of players. Took a while for Brady to kind of develop into that top tier guy, but I'm high on him. I just don't think he's top 5, top 10-ish type worthy. May is the target, not JJ. We'll see. We'll see how that pans out. Quinyon is fantastic, but I think you only do that if you don't plan on paying Sauce $30 a year. Sauce is going to be that guy. This is one of the things that I've questioned about Joe Douglas and him, when at the time when he acquired all of those first round picks. And it seemed like at least defensively, we were getting guys that are going to be playing near the top of their positions. We, that I recall, have never seen him reset the market, right? He seems very tentative when those kind of conversations go on, right? He doesn't necessarily have a great framework, I would say, to work off of, unless you're using specifically the most recent deals, which would be obvious. But he doesn't seem to love that territory, right? He likes to know where his number is, where his line in the sand is going to be, and he operates from that standpoint. So having to be the guy that would essentially be the trendsetter, if you will, when it comes to a contract like a Sauce Gardner, I think we'll get it done, but I think it'll kind of lean towards one of those scarier Darrelle Revis type situations where we literally wait until almost the beginning of the season before we lock him in, and we take every advantage we can with franchise tags and all that kind of stuff to reel it in. I'm hoping not. A lot of that has led to later issues once again, but we'll see. Giants want JJ, Vikings want May is what I've heard. Yeah, that's the recent rumors I've seen through the grapevine this morning. But I don't know. I've started to hear all of the names circulate with all of the same teams. Once again, I would say JJ with the Vikings is potentially lethal, though, between what he can do on the ground, him having a Justin Jefferson, and what we just saw him do with the Brian Thomas and with the Malik Neighbors. He's already stepping into an offense with some of the same elements. I would not love to see that if I'm a team in the NFC. I'm not on board with the move looking that far ahead. Fair play. I do feel good about tonight. Facts. I will continue to say this. I don't think that we can screw up day one for ourselves. We are positioned to take advantage no matter what. Hey, okay. Starting the show for Gunny. Got you. That's what's up. Yeah, I'm hoping I can still make it the first 30 minutes or so. Actually, I think he said, I can't remember if he said it kicks off at 4 or 5. I always got to play around with the time zone stuff in my head. Tigo, are you taking callers? Do you know if you will before, after, or during the show? I think that's the approach most of us should have, right? As long as it's not defense, I won't go that far, right? I think relative, and it all depends. Maybe we'll get glimpses of like Jets Flight 24 or whatever. As long as it doesn't seem like an obvious reach. And I'll just say I'm comparing that to like the consensus big board, right? I think that's generally the better approach to go off of rather than just, like Connor Rogers, if he's one of your favorite Jets analysts or something like that. The consensus where they're pulling all of this stuff, I think is always a decent enough one to go off, even though we've seen teams have completely different versions. As long as it's not us taking like a Tyler Guyton, for example, at 10, he's a guy that I love, but definitely towards the end of round 1. And that's more so just because of what he offers from a physical standpoint. I think the skill set isn't anything that wows me. And honestly, I loved his tackle mate a little bit more in terms of a guy that can probably outperform him if he goes to the right coach. Yeah, we'll see. I know from when I chatted with Gunny, I don't know anything about him taking callers per se. I just know he's going to have quite an all-star cast of guys coming through. Yeah, I think what was it? I think he said she has like a dance rehearsal or recital or something. So hopefully that's going well for her. Rogers quick pass to Bowers for a gain of 20 at the 2-yard line. Let's go. Yeah, even Bowers, I've come around, right? It wasn't that hard of a conversation, honestly. I just think there's guys like Theo Johnson or Jaheim Bell later on that you can get. Obviously, they're not at Bowers' level. I think we do need to put some respect on what we've seen Bowers do the last 3 years of his collegiate career. But are you really going to, is he that much better than like a Tyler Conklin, for example, with the more specialized role that you're going to have to put him in to succeed in this offense and the packages you're going to have to build for him? Is he that much better or more effective than Tyler Conklin, who, by the way, we haven't really seen fully unleashed? We've seen him, I won't even say disappear. We've just seen him not get targeted for plenty of games where he was eating linebackers and safeties alive. And obviously he's had the occasional, drop in the end zone or whatever that's also skewed some of his numbers. But I like Tyler Conklin, and I think Jeremy Rucker can take a huge step again behind Aaron Rodgers as well. So if we wanted to go this specialized H-back route, I think we can wait. With that said, though, he would turn a lot of those passes in the flat and quick dump offs, most likely into first downs, just guaranteed. If we miss out on the top 3, I want Byron Murphy. If I can't be happy, I don't want the O-line, and Bowers can't be happy. Wow, Wave, that's diabolical. I do love the idea of having a strong option right out of the gate paired with Quinnen Williams, but this isn't the time for that. I hear the Rams might want to move up to 10. I have heard them looking to jump in the top 10. Would you move back to, I think they pick at 19, by the way, Red John. Would you move back to 18, and who would you take? We would also get a second rounder. I'm not as certain that second round is guaranteed unless you do have a team like the Rams per se, where you're going to get that middle to later round selection. If we moved back to 18, I think at that point, I've heard a couple of things here. I've heard that the Jets have some kind of medical flag on Troy Fautanu, which is a guy I'm still really, really high on. And then I think at that point, you look at a guy like Fuaga, who I think could potentially drop that far. I'm not sure if he gets past the Saints, who I think pick 3 or 4 picks higher. But I would look at a Fuaga. I would look at an Amarius Mims at that point. 18, or I would say if not Byron Murphy, if Brian Thomas is still on the board, you seriously consider one of those three guys? I would probably still lean tackle. I'm starting to kind of feel better about Brian Thomas. The only thing that scares me is the 1 year wonders. I know he's had a borderline historical year, the 17 touchdowns. I think he had almost 1,400 yards or whatever it was. But when you take a look at the 2 years prior, he did almost nothing. Um, so I don't know. It's a little boom or bust for me, for a guy in round one that we really want to see hit the ground running. But especially for a guy that, by the way, if you take a look at wide receiver, if Mike Williams isn't ready to go day one, we're going to be, or I should say game one, we're going to be pissed if we see and roll out of Brian Thomas and he seems to be ineffective in those first 3-4 games, no matter if we're winning or not, right? We're going to immediately call for Mike Williams. He might press to come back early. And then we're going to be talking pretty brazenly, I would imagine, about him already being a bust and not giving him the time. But his skill set would fit well as a deep threat. I would probably say just wait if you do get that second rounder, though, and see if you can get a Troy Franklin, who I think had a massively underrated year when you consider what Jaden Daniels did, having Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas versus what Troy Franklin had with was he Bo Nix? Bo Nix is his QB. So I have been team O-line and trade down all offseason. I have seen that pretty frequently from you, 10-star. I'm thinking go all in for MHJ or Neighbors, but hold the fort for Adunze. I just don't love the idea of trading up. I think some of the trades that we made, like why am I forgetting his name? But the edge that we picked up from Hassan Reddick, I think stuff like that is smart. It's a couple years down the line. Nobody's really caring that much. But I don't want 2025. We're looking at the same situation where we don't have a second and then now we don't have a third. And so you're picking in the first and then you're having to wait all the way to the fourth round and stuff like that. If anyone can screw this up, it's us. I wouldn't say that, right? We've seen the Raiders have ridiculous overdraft value on players like Clelin Ferrell. You've seen the Saints that screwed up really bad last year, taking Trevor Penning. You've seen some teams do some very laughable things just at face value, right? You always got to wait and see how things work out. But I would say, at least under Joe Douglas, things have been respectable, even if we don't always necessarily agree with the picks. Defensively, more often than not, those are definitely working. And then offensively, I would say that's more of a coaching staff issue. We don't really know what these guys are because we're all over the place, whether that's what we're teaching technique wise or the guys really are just trash and, we're the only ones that can't recognize it. They want to move into the top 10, not just our spot. Yeah, facts. I think we'll be one of the entry points, though. All of it's kind of depending on who's hanging around between pick 6 and 10, I would imagine. Wow, Wave, if that happens, I think most of the fan base may try to find you, buddy. If we go defense, I'm just saying maybe it's a smart move to go shelter in place. Red John, if the Rams want to come up, wait, what? If the Rams want to come up, I would go to 19 every day of the week. I think, to be honest, I think like 14 to 19 is probably the optimal place to be in if you aren't guaranteed, like, obviously 4 or 5 is perfect because you get a Marvin or your pick of the wide receivers, you get Joe Alt. But after that, everybody else is kind of up in the air about, what they feel talent wise. So at 14 to like 19 range, I think is probably the sweet spot for not overdrafting a guy or in certain eyes getting extreme value. So yeah, it especially if we do get that second with it and it's not just like us recouping an additional third, I have no complaints. I think that's a misconception. Don't need to put him into a specialized role. Just use him as a tight end. Oh, I think that's supposed to be IDK. I don't know where this narrative came from that he can't block. It just ain't true. I'm not in that fan club. I think as a blocker, he's perfectly acceptable. I wouldn't call him elite or anything like that. At least when it comes to coming right off the line, that's where I get concerned with him. He is obviously lighter. We've seen him have decent enough reps in college. But I don't think many guys necessarily improve greatly as a blocker per se once they get to the NFL. So he's going to get out there. I imagine our defensive line, for example, is going to rough him up pretty often during practices. We're going to be able to blow by him pretty quick or push him into the pocket and help that collapse. So I don't love the idea of putting him in those kind of circumstances, which is why I think he'll have more of a specialized role. You'll want to split him wide. You'll want to try to give him some room off of the line of scrimmage so he's not getting pressed or getting chipped per se by a defensive guy. And then you put him in that advantageous situation where he can outrun a linebacker or he can outmuscle a cornerback, a safety, however, teams want to try to match up if they believe he's the best weapon on the field at that point in time. But I don't think he'll be terrible in a normal classic tight end role as we know it. I just don't think that would be the best use for him. I like the idea of drafting a tackle for emergency and the future, but with Mike Williams' health, drafting and pass catcher serves this year and next year. I would argue tackle is still the bigger need. You have three guys, and I know John Simpson got a 2-year contract, but you have three guys that are essentially on 1 year because if John Simpson turns out to be trash, we're definitely going to cut him next year. Three guys essentially on 1-year deals, depending on performance. Tyron Smith can easily say I'm hanging up the cleats regardless of if we win the Super Bowl or if we end up losing. And then Morgan Moses is a guy I can see us try to re-sign for another additional 2 years or so, but nobody seems, I can't find anybody other than a Damian Woody, for example, that feels extremely confident that Carter Warren or a Max Mitchell can develop and they can take over the future of that position. Everybody at the very least feels like there's a 2-year project there. This year, we're adding a tackle no matter what. So I think Max Mitchell's on the outside looking in anyways, which is tough because I think his development has been impacted more by health than anything else. And he's had some nice moments. But I would say I'm confident expecting that a Jason Brownlee or an Xavier Gibson or whoever we draft this year can develop and take on a bigger role comfortably enough, as opposed to thinking that Carter Warren or Max Mitchell or a later round rookie this year on the offensive line will be able to do the same thing for us. I take the proposed Rams trade and trade up again. I don't know about that. Yeah, I don't know if I would do it to trade up again. I'm trying to think who may fall out of the first round where I would say I need to go grab that guy. And I can't necessarily I guess it would depend on if we go tackle or wide receiver first. But I don't think there's a guy I'm dying to have in the second that will make me want to trade up or try to trade back up into like the end of the first again. Tick Bowers at 10. Bulldogs. Wow. Make the safety squeal out. I love the bars. Again, I'm not mad at it. I would be curious to see how we plan to utilize him. That's really about it. I think we've done way worse in many, many drafts than pick the best tight end that we've seen in the last 2 years in college. So specialized role or not, or we try to use him in a specialized role in a classic tight end alignment. It is what it is. I think it's going to be hard to see him fail. I just don't think it's the best use of resources because we do, I think, already have studs in Tyler Conklin and Jeremy Ruckert. And then also, I don't think he's going to be giving any special teams value, which means you're kicking Jeremy Ruckert probably down the depth chart to play special teams because I doubt we'll try to carry 4 tight ends. Let Yeboah, let Kuntz, and let a later round tight end battle it out and, try to secure that third position. Private seems to be in agreement with Marist. Honestly, Honestly, after them picks, not saying move up for MHA, but honestly, go win a ring. You do believe this team can win it all, or you don't. Fair play. Um, I don't think if we're trading up and we're not necessarily losing any resources in the third or fourth round this year, I could be okay with that. I wouldn't want us to see us give. I wouldn't want to see us lose a third rounder this year or a fourth, just to make sure we can secure our O line depth, and then we also give up like a first, second, or a third next year. Um, just because I don't fully trust that we are as secure as we think offensively. I know that would be the plan in the trade up. You're either fully locking in the offensive line room, most likely with Joe Alt, or you are fortifying wide receiver with a Marvin Harrison or a Neighbors or a Doomsday. A lot of y'all have been ripping on me on that. Whoever your preference is, but I've said this before. I think the value of, let's say, trading back, like they mentioned with the Rams, getting a tackle and getting a wide receiver, I think the combination of those two players will exceed what you get from trading up to get one of the top three receivers or to get a Joe Alt in the long term. A 1 year screw up, fine, but we seem to have done it more consistently. Yeah, it's been bad. I mean, there's a reason Zach Wilson is setting us back a couple years again, and we had to lose our second rounder this year to go get Aaron Rodgers last year. There's a reason why everybody's pissed about the offensive line depth and just our starting five. Keep in mind, this is the most confident anybody's been about our starting five units since the days of probably Nick Mangold and, Brick and having like Alan Faneca and all of them. And, you're talking about like 2003 to like 2008. So it's about time. But I'm glad to see that the trend is going upward, where you can say that we've been doing at least, at worst, an average job of drafting guys that are producing. Think someone great falling to us at 10 regardless. Yeah, it's hard to imagine that. Like the doomsday scenario that I always see is all three of the top, the top three wide receivers are gone. Joe Alt is gone. Obviously, you have three quarterbacks coming off the board, so that's 8 players. And then you see like a Brock Bowers go. And then by the time it gets to us, then you're looking at only like Olu, Fuaga, Fautan, whoever your favorite offensive line is, and then just defensive players. That may be worst case scenario for us. But again, I would still love it. That means we're walking away with a Fashanu or somebody like that who we feel great about stepping in right out of the gate. Also, while we're talking about offensive line, one of the things that I'm seriously considering is it would be great for us to have a Fashanu or an Alt or whoever to walk out there, because I don't think we're going to give Tyron Smith a ton of play during the offseason, right? He's going to be doing a lot of rehab. He's going to be doing maybe a lot of conditioning, but he's essentially going to be trying to maintain his body for when the games count. We won't see him during the preseason, I imagine. Maybe we'll see him one series like we did in game 4 last year with Rodgers in the starting unit. But outside of that, I think they're going to really try to preserve everybody. So that whole offseason is going to be dedicated to the tackle that you bring in to, get them acclimated, get them developed, polished as much as you can. And then, they'll kind of be on standby until we actually need them, or they're giving breathers during the regular season. Johnny, appreciate you, my guy. What do you think Les Snead is saying right now? The Rams have always been aggressive, though. So, I mean, I'm not surprised that they're wanting to come back. They're just changing their approach from free agency to the draft. Saying that a UDFA wide receiver would take a step up in the wide receiver room, but 2 fourth-round picks who have started in the NFL with the worst quarterback in football against 8-man boxes consistently is kind of hypocritical, just saying. 2 fourth-round picks. Who am I missing here? Who are we talking about? Who do we have in our room right now? Irv, Gibson, Brownlee, or UDFA. Got you. The tackles, Warren and Mitchell. Yeah, but I think it's a whole nother ballpark. I don't know if that's apples to apples when you want to talk about offensive line production versus wide receivers being able to go out there and perform successfully in the offense. I don't love the numbers that Jason Brownlee or Xavier Gibson put up, but I think there's a way that you can scheme those guys to look good in the offense. Aaron Rodgers obviously going to help in that element. You can use that same argument for the offensive line, but we've also seen there's that one report that always sticks in my mind that I didn't love, where I think it was the Cowboys game. Keith Carter allegedly was saying that he wants to help out. He wanted to help out Dwayne Brown. He wanted to give help to our tackles anyways, and it kind of fell on deaf ears with Nathaniel Hackett. So, like, if we fall into an issue where some injuries occur and we're out there on an island again, just trying to make things work, I'm a little bit iffy. But I mean, I don't know. We're just throwing out arguments here at this point. But I think, just in my personal opinion, it would be easier to figure out a way to make a wide receiver successful than it would be to kind of mask any weaknesses on the offensive line. I prefer tackle at 10 because it's easier to get a wide receiver in the third or next year. Just think both are viable. Fair play. I don't think anybody would argue that in the third or fourth round this year, the tackle value isn't going to be as great as the wide receiver is. Appreciate you, Maris. Talking about the tackles, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, ultimately, I'm not mad at it, whichever way we go. Unless we do something stupid, like we take again, defense, or we take somebody that's going in the second round, like a Malachi Corley or something crazy. I have no qualms about pretty much any way we could tackle this draft. I like Warren. Mitchell's regressed badly since the blood clots. Yeah, that's trash. I like Warren from what he can be. You take a look at the athletic traits. You take a look at the way Pittsburgh utilized him, where they did allow him to kind of play on the island a little more than maybe your average tackle. There's elements that you love. The footwork and everything. One of the things I am concerned with, and I guess depending on which tackle we take whenever we take them, that may answer some of these questions. I know X Factor put out an article very early on about when you take a look at the guys we brought on in Morgan Moses and John Simpson, they are more elements of, gap power play rushers. We've always been pretty deep in the West Coast trenches, wide zone. We're not blocking man to man. We are blocking for pathways, zones, opening up lanes. And that's not necessarily a strong suit, at least in John Simpson's game. I think Morgan Moses, you can definitely make that argument. We've already seen it before, even though it was a different variation with LaFleur. But I am curious to see how we're going to try to play things, right? And essentially, the advantage that we should have about playing in more of a gap scheme, if that is the way we're leaning to, is defenses are copying essentially what we're doing, right? Lighter linebackers, safeties that aren't necessarily defined to one role, but they're also playing, sub 200 pounds. You can go out there and punish those boys up front, and then put Breece Hall against a lot of those guys that he's going to either run away from, or he's going to stick a shoulder in their chest or an arm in their mouth and call it a day. So I'm curious how that plays out. Last year with the broken O-line, our O-line was league average with time of protection. The problem was that 100%. 100%. I honestly believe if Aaron Rodgers was still out there, we're not saying this offensive line is as bad as it is, but I want to limit as many excuses with the offensive line being the main problem people look at as possible. That's really the standpoint and mentality that I have on it. I have seen you mention this before, Tigo. I don't know if Max can hold up at guard though. I don't. I'd have to go back and look at some of the reps. I think we played him for like 3 games at guard, if I remember correctly. And I know Javon Foster was a guy that Gino really loves him. Javion Foster, I think, is the actual name. Um, or no, I'm thinking of Javion Cohen. I know who you're talking about. That's one of your guys. I think I've seen him on the draft that you did with Green Bean competing. Fair play. I believe Warren, remember he didn't have training camp last season. He didn't start practice until maybe week 4. Yeah, he was rehabbing a lot longer than I think we expected. Or he came back early. I can't remember, but I thought he was supposed to be out the whole offseason in general. But he came in early, then got hurt, then had to sit out, then got tossed back into the fire during the regular season. So we'll see, right? I think he has a prime opportunity to stand out this offseason. I am curious if the Jets still view him as a left tackle versus right tackle. I think we're playing too often with fire with just trying to throw guys in multiple positions just to say they have the versatility. I think that might be a prime example of what could have screwed up Mekhi Becton last year. The only way we draft defense at 10 is if they hire Mike McCagnon and he convinces them to draft a DT again. God, I hated some of the GMs that we had, dude. Every GM has made maybe 1 or 2 very valuable moves for us, but on the large wholesale part of it, you don't understand the vision, you don't understand the thought process with a lot of what these guys were doing. It's just been absolutely horrific. Max is still light. He needs to put on weight, and is his main issue, and he hasn't been given that opportunity because of blood clots and the injury. Yeah, but that's kind of what I'm saying. Outside of what he is right now, I don't know if his health issues will allow him to get to where he needs to play guard. I think he'll end up, unfortunately, being a lost cause for us, which is trash. We can't ever seem to get these mid-round guys to either stay on the field for one, or really consistently turn into anything for us, which is really frustrating. Got to tell you guys, I was impressed with what I seen from Jake Hansen last season. We need cheap options like him to improve. I'm going to be honest. I checked out after, what was it? Maybe week 12, week 13. I checked out last year. I was done. I tried to pay attention as best I could, but yeah, I got lost in the sauce, man. It was rough watching all of those games. Then I was trying to go back and catch all 22 tape and see if there was anything we could really do that we could have taken advantage of next year. It was exhausting. But I'm going to wrap up here soon, guys. Appreciate y'all coming through to chat. I'm going to be on for another couple minutes real quick. Let me see if y'all have any other questions, hot takes, etc. Okay, rumors Michael Penix might be a lock. Hansen played better than Tomlinson. My mother played better than Tomlinson last year. Tomlinson was very frustrating. Somehow, I've seen it statistically and I've seen it on film. Somehow, Tomlinson managed to outdo what he did the year before, which is wild. I'll say this: JD holds on to his guys to the end. Don't see Max as a cut candidate, in my opinion. Facts. I was on board with that too. When I predicted last year, though, and a lot of people were cracking jokes and saying I was tripping. When I said Zach Kuntz was going to get cut and we'll hope to sneak him on the practice squad, I think that kind of signaled a change. The roster isn't in the same condition he's had it in for the first couple of years. We're getting Aaron Rodgers on now. There's going to have to be some of those harder decisions that are made. So again, if we go tackle again, you already have your two starters locked in. You're hoping Carter Warren outperforms Max Mitchell, which I think just makes sense from a recency bias standpoint. And then you have your new rookie, who's either going to be a first round pick, so a high pedigree, or he's going to be a third rounder, unless we do trade back and get a second. And then you're probably talking about a guy that has ridiculous physical traits from what we've seen from this tackle class so far. So, or elite versatility, right? A Dominic Pony, a Patrick Paul out of Houston, if I'm rethinking that name correctly. Any a number of those guys, right? And if you want to have the guard conversation, if we do try to fit Max Mitchell on the interior, and we do get a guy like a Christian Mahogany, or we get one of my favorites in Mason McCormick, or Zach Minter or somebody like that, then I think it's kind of the same conversation where Max Mitchell just looks like he's on the outside looking in. If the Jets have a handshake agreement with Bach or Donovan Smith for after the draft, does that change your perspective? I've been thinking about this for a while because I've heard a number of people mention this. Donovan Smith, I'm not really a fan of. Like I love the hometown connection and all of that good stuff. But to be honest, he was maybe average at best for the Chiefs last year, which would be a step up for us, for somebody that can just stay on the field and play average. But that's not really what I'm looking for this season. Bakhtiari is definitely more intriguing to me. But then the conversation becomes, for me, I think you can get a full season out of the two of those guys. But I don't know if I would trust two. And it's tough to give Bakhtiari the injury prone label. I've chatted with Gunny a number of occasions, and I know he's kind of walked me through the botched knee surgery issues and stuff he's dealing with. But I wouldn't necessarily want two injury plagued guys on the same roster holding down the fort. It's a hell of a trio with those two and Moses. And then you have I don't know how you play that out. I guess we carry 5 tackles, right? 5 tackles, 4 guards, and then Titman, if you're talking about 10 offensive linemen. So if the draft doesn't play out the way they want, I guess I can see that. I guess I can see that happening. I don't know if I would want to rely on that, though. I would rather, because it doesn't seem like anybody's in any rush to sign Bakhtiari, right? So if we do have a handshake deal with him, still get your tackle. And then I would say if things play out where Tyron Smith goes down and we don't get him back to the playoffs or something, then you can go out and get you a Bakhtiari and have him come in mid-season, and he's had more time to rest and all this other stuff. But I don't think it really changes how I would approach attacking the draft, to answer the question. Everyone gets hurt. Yeah, but we haven't seemed to have guys that are really able to play through the injuries that we get, especially since it ends up being lower body, extremity stuff, ankles, the Achilles, ACL type situations. And then in AVT's case, the torn labrum, trash. DK is Neighbors Odunze dream scenario. DK is Neighbors Odunze dream scenarios, MHA or bust. We need to go all in. Trade up, get that receiver no matter the cost. This team JD put together is ready to win now. Tackle or tight end can be drafted in the 3rd or the 4th. Yeah, I mean, I have found an offensive lineman that I at least really like in every round of the draft, even going into day 7. I don't know if they'll all be there because I'm curious. I've seen some wide varying opinions on some of the later round guys I like. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm not mad at it either way. If we want to go all in, cool. Um, I don't think we've, and this is no reason not to do this, but I'm just putting it out there. I don't think we've necessarily handled expectations great as a franchise before. So that's something that I'm also just kind of thinking about when we make this move with Joe Douglas. And it's kind of how they have to approach things, anyways. But with Joe Douglas, if we feel like he is more secure in his job than Robert Saleh, really hitch his wagon to trading up, and maybe that be the make or break thing that sends him packing with Saleh if it doesn't work out too. Bot can't sign because he can't pass a physical yet, is what I heard. Eee. See, and that is not a great sign to me. That screams that, for as well as I heard his most recent surgery go, he may just have long term issues with it. I can't imagine you can really fully correct a botched surgery, right? It's like watching somebody get a simple nose job or something simple, right? We're still talking about altering human body parts, but like getting a simple nose job that like cracks his stuff one way, and then you have to try to overcorrect the other, and so now you got smushing and all this wild stuff. Um, yeah, I don't know. Between age, the botched surgeries, him kind of finally feeling like he's gotten it right, um, and then of course our turf and stuff. It's a combination that scares me. Uh, cool. Well, I am going to wrap up here, guys. It's an OBJ situation. It'll be good to go. It's just a right now thing. Yeah, and that's kind of why I mentioned if we can get him towards like the, I don't know, at some point during the regular season. I hope we wouldn't need him, but if it came up and he's still available, it would be a smart move. I wouldn't just go and grab him up front. 1072 next year's first, and what else for MHA? Uh, two first and our third rounder. I do remember him not passing his physical last year, though. 10. I don't think he got healthy enough until what was it? Right before like the league owners meeting where we seen him taking pictures with like Joe Douglas and all that. I think he had only passed his physical like a week or two before that. 1072 in next year's first for MHJ. So wide receiver in first, and then what? You do, I'm assuming everybody's penciling in a tackle at 4. We don't have a 5th rounder, and then I think we have our 2 6th and then a 7th now. So Marvin, tackle in the 4th. A guard in the 6th. I'm assuming you still want to get another wide receiver in the 6th. And then you probably go like defensive tackle, tight end, something like that in the 7th, I would imagine. I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I would just prefer to have in the first and third two high floor caliber players, from what my assumption would be anyways, as opposed to a elite tier guy and like an MHJ. And then you're starting to get back into like the Carter Warren, Max Mitchell territory where we haven't had great luck. And keep shooting the dice, right? You got to hit on somebody at some point. That's just the law of averages. But I will say this again, though, for as much as I'm saying I wouldn't want to really wait and hold off for like offensive line and stuff like that. I have been in this camp since day one. My opinion hasn't really fluctuated on this whatsoever. I think Keith Carter is a great offensive line coach. So I think as long as they match the traits and the physical, measurements that Keith Carter will look for and like in his offensive linemen, I think he will find a way, as long as they're healthy, to get them developed, and he's going to put something good out there on the field for us. Yeah, I forgot to even think about trade chart value stuff. From 10 to 4, I think our 10th pick is 1,300 points. So number 4 is probably like 2,200 or something. So you're talking what? Probably like 600 point overpayment. Who's at 4 again? The Cardinals, and I don't remember how many picks they have. So they'll probably have to shoot us something back. And I don't imagine if they're going to drop towards the end of the top 10, where they probably are going to miss out on a wide receiver, that they would give us something back like a second or a third to maybe make it worth it, if we want to be trying to, be realistic about the trade. 2 firsts would be more than a good enough package to get to 5. The Chargers are wide open with what they can pick, no matter where they go in the top 10. So if they can get another first round, I'm sure they would be extremely excited about it. I think McCormick may go as high as the 2nd. If he's there in the 4th, I am in tears of enjoyment. Pooney may be in the 4th still. Who's NDS? NDS. You're not trying to say North Dakota State, I think. Oh, crumb. Got you. 4th is 1,800. Chargers is 17 at 5. I wouldn't even give up my 1st in that scenario. Then I'd see if I can finesse the 2nd. Let me think. The ideal hope is that we're picking 32 next year. So 3,200, I think at 32 is still going to be more than 500. Yeah, maybe. All right, let me get out of here, though. Let me try to get back to work so I can actually enjoy the draft party for a little bit later on with Gunny and Tigo and the rest of the Jets content world. We gotta find a way to get more of some of these guys out there. It's dope seeing Jets Central and Jets Media. I think I've seen Green Bean, or at least his voice, pop up on there now. But we got to get a compilation video or something for them to get Tigo and Gunny and the rest of these guys out there. You need to get the first salary if you want to come. Remember, that's the first. Next year's points is considered a mid-round 2nd in this year. True. If we're picking where we should be picking, which will be 32, though, I'm not sad about it. Yeah, I'm not mad about it at all. I am curious, though. Imagine, I don't think people have as much of a varied opinion on this as I thought earlier on in the process. But imagine we do trade up to 4 and we end up going Neighbors rather than Harrison. I think Odunze would be the only guy I get pissed if we trade up for. Not saying he's terrible and not in the same caliber necessarily, but I think it's different. I make that deal and sleep well. Touche. It's a reason why we're not all GMs, I guess. Oh no, I agree. F them picks, just not giving 72. Yeah, at that point, that's overkill. Hey, T, much appreciated, my man. Can we get Bakhtiari and Andrews Peak in free agency for backup support? Let's go all in and trade up for that receiver. Yeah, I mean, we chatted about it. Bakhtiari, I think, would be a great in-season emergency, break the glass option. I wouldn't go Andrews Peak. I would probably look at Josh Jones as my next emergency option, though, if for whatever reason Bakhtiari isn't there. See you on tonight, Tigo, as you cover for Gunny. Yeah. I've seen Tigo running a few of the shows on like the Let's Talk Jets channel and all of that. Tigo puts in the work. He's in there, buddy. Y'all gonna have a dope first hour or so, whatever he's covering for Gunny. We all should be. I say it again, man. Months and months and months of mock drafts and rumors and nonsense, and us playing devil's advocate with everything. We finally won't have to worry about that anymore. My heart's gonna be pumping though. Anytime I hear that a trade alert has been kicked off, I'm gonna be tapped in. I don't know how much work I'm gonna really get done the rest of the day once about 3:00 comes. I'm gonna try to lock in this next hour and a half. What's good? Great show. Trade up to 4 and get MHJ. Give up 10, both 4s in next year's first. Wow. I don't know if you've seen the comments before this, my man. I don't know if this is Liam, by the way, that's commenting this. Just Afterburners podcast. They got a great show. They've kind of revamped it. Or if this is one of the other guys, appreciate you coming through regardless. But yeah, that's a lot. I'm not giving all of that up personally. I would probably never do that unless our roster is just essentially foolproof. I don't think I would ever do that for anything other than a quarterback. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there would be a tackle or a wide receiver that would make me change my mind. But yeah, I think quarterback is the only position just because the value you're going to get is always going to eclipse if you hit anything you need to give them on that rookie contract. That's a lot. Kind of like Tigo and some of the other guys, 10-star and them have chatted in here. I think we could get away with giving a first. And if we needed to, if they're pressing, right, because there's always a quarterback tax, if you will, they can always try to make the argument that somebody else is leapfrogging up for a JJ or somebody that maybe you throw in like one of the 6th or something. But yeah, I'm not giving up the farm. We're one player away, my man. We're finally that team to be placed over top. I don't think we're one guy away. Joe Douglas said it best a long time ago. Today's luxury is tomorrow's need, something to that standpoint, paraphrasing. And I stand by that. You've seen the way the Saints offensive line crumbled just seeing Ryan Ramczyk drop. If Garrett Wilson, God forbid, was to go down, you would see how drastically different our offense will alter. And I get what you're saying. MHJ added to that, if they're healthy, would, put us over the top. We probably undoubtedly have the best wide receiver trio in the league. If we do get an MHJ or something like that, MHJ specifically, if we do get him, I would be curious if we would take a look at moving Garrett Wilson more into the slot and seeing him try to return back to his college role a little bit more. I wish I could get this longer though, because I could chat right up until draft time if I really, really wanted to and try to knock out work at the same time. But I do want to try to be available for when all of these draft parties and stuff are kicking off. So again, appreciate everybody coming through. Maybe I'll be able to put together a post-draft stream or something tonight. I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of the other guys between Chigo, Green Bean, Matt O'Leary, Jake Asman, all of them kicking stuff off. So I'll see y'all at some point on somebody's channel. If it's not mine, hopefully you guys enjoy and can relax a little bit until the draft, though. I will kick it with you guys. Again, peace.